the Swiss Federal Minister of Foreign Affairs. Recently, the Swiss minister visited the capital city of Kyiv in Ukraine and then traveled to the city of Moscow in Russia. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Switzerland. This only means that new laws will be adopted in the near future. And new provisions, possibly some secret provisions that we won't know about, but which are related to the approaching war. And this is exactly what we understand, that the visit of the Swiss Minister of Foreign Affairs to both warring countries, to both sides, means something more than the current situation we are in. Switzerland, as a traditionally neutral nation, is fundamentally expected to uphold a strict policy of neutrality towards all countries currently at war with each other. For example, if Switzerland sells its weapons are among the best, I should say. If it sells weapons to Ukraine, then at the same time this is considered neutrality. At the same time, it must also sell weapons to Russia in exactly the same way. What a strange law, right? Sort of odd, but it's about neutrality. It is obliged to support all sides, both one and the other. That's why we are now waiting and anticipating various changes that are expected to take place in Swiss society. Especially when it comes to foreigners who are now arriving in Switzerland in truly huge numbers. The Swiss habit of the mountains. I'm sitting here with a hide behind me, another hide underneath me. This is how people live in the mountains. No, in the valley, people don't live like this. But in the Swiss mountains, especially high up where I live, this is how it's done. They cover everything they can with hides, anywhere you might want to sit. Well, that is a tradition, yes. There are traditions that wherever you go, wherever you try to settle, there are traditions. I started telling you about how the world is organized, about governance. And so, in particular, in that video where I talked about Elvira Nabiullina and how she exchanged the Russian currency for yuan, now China doesn't accept payments in yuan at all because they simply don't need them anymore. In this way, Elvira Nabiullina put the entire Russian economy under China's control. Now China will be the master. Did she sell someone out? No, in fact, she didn't sell anyone out. She answers to the central bank, which is the bank in Basel, Switzerland. But she was also carrying out orders from China, which is led by an intelligence officer, a counterintelligence agent, a Chinese one who sits in the Kremlin and basically dictates policy. We've talked about this a lot and for a long time. I even showed his face, photographs, but somehow for people it's distant, right? And no one tells you about this every day. And since no one talks about it, well, state channels don't talk about it, pro-Kremlin analysts don't mention it either. So that means it doesn't exist. That's usually how people perceive information, but it's nothing to worry about. Life, shows how the world really works, and over time it becomes clearer to everyone. What isn't clear today will become clear in 5 years. There's no need to regret it here. That as a smart person, you didn't take the right steps in time, and as a result, you were left out in the cold. And after the fact, you can take some steps, but these steps, first of all, will give you the opportunity to lose probably 70% of your money. There will be only a small amount left that you'll want to put somewhere, but by then, it will already be too late. Basically, you always need to act at the moment when I mention it. If you didn't act at that moment, then the train has already left the station. Of course, you can try to catch up with the departing train, but that's more of a struggle, let's say, for your capital, when it feels painful to just give your capital away to someone. But that's just one person's perspective. He feels bad about giving away his capital when he could have kept it and invested it properly at the right moment. But that's another matter entirely. That's the business of rich people, very rich people. Elvira Nabiullina is someone's daughter and she is very wealthy. Just like Lavrov, he is also very rich, also someone's son or grandson. But I won't say whose, maybe I even know, but I won't say. Honestly, it's not that interesting anyway. Basically, I've already told you some of the basics. Just like with us, they make people believe that Stalin was poor. His boots and so on, that's what he had. Just one old worn-out overcoat. But the fact that he wore an overcoat with gold buttons, nobody talks about that. These are the kinds of things where people want to believe what they wish were true, but which never actually happened. Stalin and Hitler were the richest people in the world at the time when they were in power. The richest. They divided the world into two parts. One part remained with Stalin, the other with Hitler. Both died, supposedly, but in reality they survived. And with this enormous wealth, they built their empires and shaped the politics that we live with today. The poorest man, Stalin, took the Middle East, Lebanon, Tamsin, and Muammar Gaddafi, along with Iraq, Tamsin, and the leader Saddam Hussein. Of course, I think you understand that neither of them actually died. They survived. Stalin divided up such a major country as Persia. He split it into parts, and part of Persia, namely Azerbaijan. Today's Azerbaijan became part of the Soviet Union. The larger part of the province of Azerbaijan remained in Persia. But Persia as a country disappeared from the maps. What remained was Iran, Iraq, Libya, and Jordan. All these countries are new. Just like Israel, a new country without any ancient history. That is, there was no ancient Israel, no ancient Jerusalem, nothing at all. This is all recent history, a modern creation in which we live today. So I'm telling you this as an addition to the previous video from which this part was missing, because the internet started having issues. Yes, the Wi-Fi is acting up. I don't know why, but my recording stopped and a part was lost. So Stalin, a tremendously wealthy man, organized his own countries. Libya, remember how? It was a wonderful country, a very wealthy country. And how is Muammar Gaddafi similar to Stalin? Did you notice? To that real Stalin. And his face was also pockmarked, not entirely healthy. With Stalin, it wasn't smallpox, it was something genetic, something embedded in his face. And then Saddam Hussein, he actually looks more like the Stalin that was portrayed to us as a double. Remember the mustache, the velvet collar, the mane, all combed and so handsome, right? So this is real politics, the kind no analyst will ever tell you about. Are they afraid? I don't think so. I think they just don't know about it. All of this needs to be known, it must be understood. And I'm a specialist in bastards. I can spot any kind of blood anywhere I see it. I just see it. Well, whether you believe it or not, that's up to you, my friends. Everyone has their own mind, their own brain, which either accepts or rejects information. So why am I telling you all this? To you? That today there will be a reshuffling in the world, countries will be reorganized, and these countries will first experience poverty, then they will split into some smaller states. This is a major process that has only just begun now. And the fact that Ukraine will be bombed with some kind of weapon, or that Russia will be bombed as well, with the same kind of Swiss-made weapons, that's entirely possible. That's why it's no coincidence that the Swiss foreign minister first visited Ukraine, then Russia. Perhaps he was negotiating the sale of weapons so that Ukraine and Russia would bomb each other. Those areas of land that, for example, currently belong to both Russia and Ukraine, Donbass, Belgorod, and this Belgorod-Kharkiv border, will be erased. It will no longer exist. This is the Black Earth region, with vast fields and luxurious, fertile land. I've been there quite often, and I saw this incredible land myself, and was truly amazed by it. specifically by the extraordinary rich black soil found there. But everything will be subjected to bombardment because at some point it will be necessary for this land to stop bearing fruit. Is that clear? I am Tanya Karatsuba, Sidberkan, February 10th, 2026. Always think when you listen to someone. Well, in general, Stalin, Muammar, Gaddafi, Stalin's grandchildren, well, Stalin himself was cruel. And what kind of grandchildren will there be? Yes, Muammar Gaddafi's children, what will they be like? Also cruel. One of the children, he was born from a Russian girl who lived in Crimea, and she gave birth to a child. A child, well, that's already a great-grandchild. For Stalin, that is. He was hidden, of course. What do you think? The girl was taken away. As they say from the beast, this guy Muammar Gaddafi's son, the girl was taken away. And she was taken to Crimea, and she was hidden there. And there are military bases all around. That's all there is to it. Where does she live there? Well, I definitely can't tell you where she lives because I simply don't know where she lives. But the fact is, there are military bases all around, Russian ones, not Ukrainian. They've always been there. When was she hidden anyway? Back when Crimea was still under Ukrainian control? And even then, Russian units were already stationed there. You might not know that this was the case, but those who are in the know it. The entire territory of Crimea was lined with Russian military units. The entire territory of Crimea, the mountains. What else is there? Tunnels in the mountains? All of this was under the control not of the Ukrainian command, but the Russian command, because the Russian GRU General Staff was in charge there. That's Russian military intelligence. They were the ones in charge, especially in the Crimean mountains. But the cops who are closely connected with the FSB, that's a bit of a different story, a different kind of work. Yes, the FSB is a lower-level branch, although I want to tell you that traditionally the GRU, military intelligence, I repeat, and the FSB, the KGB, they competed with each other. But when the FSB still had the abbreviation KGB, back then the KGB was a strong organization, and it could go head-to-head, so to speak, go head-to-head with intelligence. But now it can't anymore because as soon as it got those three letters, FSB, it became, well, at least 5 times weaker. But if Philip Babkov, the head of the 5th Directorate, suddenly became the head of the security division in Gorky 10, where Gusinski's residence was, and he was in charge of his security. But can you imagine the KGB doing something like that? Philip Babkov. And he, in fact, was a very important person back then. Well, and then he was a beast. I remember Vasilieva. She was actually very afraid of him. She used to meet with him. Vasilieva is the writer Vasilieva, who wrote about the Kremlin. She used to be my friend once. I used to visit her at her dacha far away. We would go somewhere where her father's tank stands, a T-34, her legendary father. Then, as it turns out in history, it becomes clear that he wasn't the one who created it, that it was once again part of the German machine. But that's no longer important. What matters is that she lived with honor, a big house, a huge plot of land, and in the distance that tank stood. I was there. My children were there. They climbed all over that tank. But in general, life is different. And the officials tell you this way, that now they are forced to obey China and the Indians. I am Tanya Karatsuba, Said Burhan.